welcome John.
All right. Well, yeah, Angela, thank you so much. I feel like what I'm going to share now is a little less probably biting, but at the other end of the scale is as important. Community, I was actually just saying this, community should be what we do as a church. Full stop. No question mark. But I wasn't brought up that way. I was brought up in a bit of a strange way. Not strange ways, but strange way. My family was born here, right in Watford. I was born here. But we moved up to East Yorkshire. Beautiful place. My parents, being loving Christians, which they were, had lots of friends that were missionaries. So guess what we did? Every time a missionary was on furlough, they would come to our house to take in the beautiful Yorkshire air. It was fantastic. I got regaled with stories. I remember one story of a very close friend of ours who worked for the Red Cross, and he went into Sudan. He was actually in Darfur. And he was going into prisons with the Red Cross to check that they were keeping up with what they're meant to do. Not that they were, but that's okay. And while he was there, he was praying. And so were a lot of the other Red Cross workers who were also Christians. Suddenly, the Holy Spirit lands straight, slap down in the middle of this prison. A bunch of Muslim guys who are in prison, pretty aggressive, start speaking in tongues, start prophesying, start singing things that they've never understood in their lives. The prison wardens don't know what to do with this situation. They know one thing. There's a riot just about to happen, and they need to get the Red Cross people out so that they don't observe this riot that's just about to happen. They weren't allowed in that prison for quite a while after that. But they could never explain what had happened, so obviously they had to let them in the end. I grew up regaled with these stories of brave missionaries going to deep, dark countries in Africa, going behind the Iron Curtain. And I grew up with the Great Commission. We've all heard it. Therefore, go, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. It's great. It's fantastic. And I grew up thinking that that was what it was to do community. You didn't do community in your own backyard. What you did was you got on a plane and you went all the way to Africa, or you went to Asia, or you went to America or South America or somewhere like this. But I didn't really do it in my own backyard. So, after a bit of a troubled teen life, I finally got the call from God that I wanted. I was going to go to YWAM. Now, YWAM has a reputation for sending people into stupid situations where they're probably going to get out of their depth pretty quickly. And I thought this was great, especially in foreign countries. It was going to be excellent. But I got sent up to Scotland. Now, most people take 6 months to do the basic YWAM course. I'm a little slow, as was a whole year. And what we did was we lived in community in a housing estate in Scotland, in Edinburgh. It's called Pilton. Actually, if any of you, I'm sure you're all lily white and have never watched a film like this, but if any of you have watched Trainspotting, that is where it was written about. It was violent. It was rough. And I loved it. It was fantastic. But the year we were there, something strange happened. No violence happened. I was a bit gutted, actually. I'd heard all the stories about running battles going up and down the street, and I was like, oh, come on, this is going to be great. I'm going to get in the middle of this. I'm going to be praying. They're just going to be backing off. It's going to be like the Matrix. Boom, boom. It's going to be fantastic. But that is not what happened. We lived as a community in that housing estate. Now, you would have thought, knowing the social problems that were there before and seeing what that year was like and actually experiencing it once we'd moved out, that I would have got the idea that community was pretty important. But I told you I'm slow. So I didn't quite get it. So, luckily, I did meet this lovely lady. She was called Jodie. She's my beautiful wife. She's at home taking care of our kids at the moment. And I'm very fortunate to have a ministry partner. And I met her in YWAM. And she's American. Probably a country I'd never really wanted to move to. But at the end of the day, if you have to move to a country, go to the exact same climate as yours is already. I moved to Seattle. And we got married. And a year after we were married, we were asked to run a home. That makes it sound like an institution, doesn't it? A house for international students. It was a very strange place. We had one room, and we lived all in community. We ate together. I was going to say we slept together, but we didn't sleep together. But we had separate rooms, obviously. And these international students were often not Christians. They came into the house not knowing anything about God. They had two rules. You had to be there for the weekly meeting of the house, and you had to be there for the meeting that happened through the organization. Now, this was a basic church service. But most people turned up at this house, about usually 20 to 50 people every Friday, wanting to learn about English. And guess what happened? They came and learned about English, and they accepted Christ. And then they became the leaders, and then they went back to their countries. We were right off Greek Row at the University of Washington. Community changed lives. Now, I didn't really have a perspective to put this in. I took to education a little late in my life. Actually, 10 years after I should have been doing it, I did my education. And I had no framework to put this whole social community thing in. But fortunately, with some of my studies, I worked something out. You see, Jesus obviously told us to go and make disciples of all nations. But he says another thing. He says, the Shema, which is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. Hang on. Whoa. Hang on. No. So, neighbor, hang on, that sounds like not going to a foreign country or anything like that. That sounds actually like next door. And they're scary because they might know me. God has a plan through community. You see, when Jesus came, he didn't just fix the vertical. He came to also fix the horizontal. We can now live in community. We now can be accepted by Christ. Now, the church, and again, I was talking to Angela about this, should be the forerunners in open community. It is terribly sad that we joked in America that the most segregated time of the week is Sunday morning. We lived in Seattle, in one of the most diverse cities in the whole world. And I was in a church where I was stared back at by a lot of white faces. And down the road, there was a church where some pastor probably looked out at his congregation and saw all black faces. And another one down the road. Angela said something very nice to me. I don't think that's what heaven's going to look like. I'm not only going to be seeing white faces, I'm going to be seeing black faces. And we should be the start of community. How can we expect the world to understand an all-loving God if we can't accept everybody that's in this world to start off with? Now, that's the rant over. I'll tell you what we're doing up in Stevenage. Fortunately, we came back to the UK, and Tim had plans. Well, no, Tim didn't have plans. God had plans. God had plans. We came back with the idea that we would just do anything as long as it was for the church and for the mission. And that happened to be a little place called Stevenage. We have a massive property. We have one house. It's fantastic though, because it's in a neighbourhood. It's in Chels, in Stevenage. Now, most of you will know that Stevenage is a new town, or a new town, and it was built in neighbourhoods with a pub, a church, a little shopping centre, and a community centre. Unfortunately, our modern society has eroded community. So Jodie and I think with God's assistance, no, definitely with God's assistance, because we wouldn't do it if we didn't, have said, right, community starts at this house. Last November, we celebrated Thanksgiving in Stevenage. We ended up with 25 people. Only 8 of those actually come to our church. They just come from the neighbourhood around. I was voted here. We did a sort of thing where we gave each other sort of name tags. It was silly, don't worry. We weren't labelling each other literally. But my wife actually put on me, most likely to bring home a stranger. And I think it was probably because of this experience. Because I literally, on the Friday before we did it, was in the doctor's office, started talking to somebody and said, you know, it's a bit weird, but we're having a Thanksgiving thing. Would you come round tomorrow? And they did. So community is key. We're going to be sending out prayer cards. Actually, we're doing that tomorrow. And we're going to try and build community through these prayer cards. It's not about building a big church. It's about seeing communities transformed in the likeness of God, Jesus. This means that we want to restore community in our area because it is the heart of God. If you go away with one thing tonight, remember that Jesus didn't come just to fix the vertical. He came to fix the horizontal. And it's our job as the church to welcome community, welcome everybody in. Literally everybody. And be a light to the world that there is a difference, to bring his kingdom to this earth. I think that was about 8 to 10 minutes. That's not bad because actually it went 15 minutes when I did it first up. Now, I do have a few questions, and can I do this? Because I think it's just a slidey thing, isn't it? Let's see. Did I go the right way? Yeah. So, I have a few questions. Now, these are not as deep as this lovely lady's, but I sometimes overthink things. Oh, I should have said, just because I saw the eye rolling, unfortunately, you will get football with me as well. But anyway, so we have 3 questions here. What is your role in community? What is your role in your community? What is your role in your community? What do you find hard or awkward about relating to your community? And please know, anything you say or put on a sheet or something like this, I've had it probably at some point. I've probably been found awkward. And lastly, what would it look like to relate to your community? Oh dear, that's terrible. That's not a very good question. But what would it look like to relate to your community, to reach out to your neighbours? Thank you for listening. Thank you for inviting me here. And hopefully, these will tease your brain.